Welcome back to Empowered K-12. I'm your host, Elena Pinkley, and you're listening to Voices of Impact, a series of conversations with leaders who are making a difference in education, wellness, and student experience. Dr. Derden, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad that you invited me, and I'm excited to expound on any questions you might have for your audience.
Thank you. We're excited to have you, and I'm also excited to have you share a little bit more about your work in special education. But for those who might not be familiar with your work, would you take a moment just to introduce yourself and tell us about your experience in special education?
Yes, I am currently the director of special education down here in South Carolina. I worked for 20 years in Minnesota and administration up there. And then I came south to Georgia for a year and now, like I said, South Carolina now for 5 years. So been in part of special education since 2001. So I have a wealth of experience. I've been in secondary primarily, but of course, as a director, I'm responsible for pre-K all the way up to 21. So I'm familiar with all the programs.
Absolutely. And I know you've been in different pieces of special education, and since you've been doing it for so long, you've kind of seen how the retainment and recruitment has changed over time. So I wanted to ask, in your opinion, why are special educators leaving?
Well, some of the reasons, and I talk about recently, is the fact that since COVID, lots of classroom issues happening, violence, and they feel like they're not being supported. So sometimes, especially new teachers, they feel like they're not being supported and they leave the craft because there's other opportunities. And the other reason why they can get jobs virtual now, because it used to be
Mhm.
strictly in person, but now individuals can work virtually doing other things. So they do those pieces. The other piece is compensation, not being paid for what they feel. I'll be honest with you, they're not being paid for what they do. I mean, they should get paid more. And it's not
Mhm.
so much they should get paid more because they are better than any other teachers. It's just the special educators, they have two things they have to do. They have to do instruction and they have to do compliance. So it would be nice if they got a little bump in pay because they have two entities that do more so than other teachers. And the last thing I would say is working conditions. I loop back to students and their aggressive behaviors and behavior management and not having the resources to combat those areas. Sometimes teachers feel that they don't have the right training, they don't have the right resources, and they're not being supported by admin. And so those are some of the reasons why they do leave.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the behaviors, but also that they're not being paid well. And, all of these things contribute to burnout. And I just wanted to ask, what are some signs that you've noticed when a special educator is starting to burn out?
Well, you can tell when they first start, especially new teachers, they all happy and walking around cheerful, and then you get to mid year. I want to say after winter break, as we call it, and they walk around like, okay, what man? How long have you been working at? I've been working for one semester. And so it's that depression, it's that emotional, social pressures that they're going through because when they go to school to be teachers, they don't provide you with all the tools and whistles to say, oh, this is what you're going to expect because they can't do that in the university and college because they don't know which school you're going to, and they can give you the
Mhm.
basics. But each district, each school is different. So one of the things that you see the burnout and they feel overwhelmed with paperwork because they didn't realize when they went through college courses that the paperwork that they were doing in class was just samples. But when they get to actual reality, oh, you're doing quite a few IEPs, you're doing quite a few amendments to IEPs, you're doing call it manifestation determination meetings for some students, and then you have to put in the meeting notes. So it's a lot of paperwork, and it's, like I said, they still got to teach. They still got to prepare lessons. And the last thing is case management. Some school districts have teachers with maybe 20 case students on their caseload, and then some have 30. Well, the more students you have on your caseload, the more paperwork you have to complete.
And the more parents you have to talk to.
Well, and that too. I mean, that's part of it because it's part of being a case manager. I'm hoping you communicate with your parents. That's important. You got to build that relationship. That's really important.
Absolutely. Um, you mentioned the IEPs, and I know parental communication has been a challenge across the board, not just for special education, but just for gen ed and academics in general. So, when it comes to special education, some of them kind of deal with those communication challenges. So, how are administrators better how are they able to better support special education staff emotionally and not just procedurally?
Okay. So one of the things, and I go back to when I was, because I was brought into special administration because of my background in the classroom. So one of the things you need to do is get into the classrooms a little more, not just so gen ed, but you need to walk into the special ed classrooms, let them know
Mhm.
that you're present, let them know that you're there and that you're supportive.
Okay.
Also, also making sure that you celebrate the things that they're doing. Ask, can you come in when the students are doing presentations and provide them with a little incentive to give to their students, because sometimes the special education teachers spend a lot of their money. They feel like, wait a minute, I'm spending all this money to do things in my classroom, and I don't get reimbursed for it. So just
Yeah.
finding ways to get them a little more incentive monies to work with those students, especially the students that are in classrooms that are pretty much all day that they're in those classrooms, or pretty much most of the day. The last thing is to watch their caseloads and to make sure that you're providing them with coaching support on how to manage those caseloads, because the caseloads can be tricky. You get students that come in and out. I call them transit students, and you start an IEP, and then that student leaves, and then you got a new student come in.
Mhm.
I experienced that in my career. So just ensuring them that they have ample time to do paperwork, providing them with that extra time to um, work with their professional colleagues and PLCs and such, so that way they feel like they belong as well.
Mhm. And you mentioned how the transit students, they come in and they'll work on an IEP and then the students have to leave. And I think that's a thing that gets missed a lot when you think about special education. I don't think the broader population understands that special educators have to go through all of that in training. And, we also have the students that have twice exceptional needs. And sometimes there's so many students with things like ADHD or autism that aren't diagnosed until later on. What does meaningful training look like for special education staff?
Well, first off, the best thing to do is to gauge all the staff. I'm sorry, when I say all staff, not just teachers. And so, because you have paraprofessionals, you have related services staff. So, find out exactly what they need for your particular school, district, or school, because every district and school they're different. So you can't have a universal training for everyone. Even in a district, sometimes there are schools that have a higher need for certain training. So find out what they need and provide the opportunities for the staff to be trained. And then when they are trained, do some follow up to see how that training actually worked out for them, to see if they're implementing it. Do they need some kind of adjustments? Do they need some more coaching support? That's really important. Then also provide them with what you call coaches that I call them experts that's been around for a while. So that way, they can come in and do spot trainings on the moment, come in and do observations and giving the teachers feedback. And that's meaningful training. People say, well, that's not training. Well, actually it is, because
Mhm.
someone's giving them feedback, and they're sitting down talking to them, and they come back and see if they readjusted any of the things that were suggested. And that's really helpful. I know when I first started many years ago, I was probably one of the first teachers that used to videotape my class for educational purposes only. And that way I go back and look and review it, and I would have one of my colleagues to take a look at it as well, to see that I miss doing something here. Did you see me doing? So getting feedback from another colleague is helpful too, and that's all part of professional learning. Get them the chance to do it, but the biggest key is providing meaningful professional learning that's beneficial to them, and then doing follow up to see how that professional learning is being used.
Mhm. I want to talk a little bit about mentorship because that kind of, ties into our next question. To me, having a good mentor is everything. There's been times where I've felt really burned out and I've been reignited by some of my mentors that remind you, this is why we do this work. This is why we're passionate about it. And I think that's in education a lot. There's a lot of senior level leaders that are trying to inspire and reignite that passion in teachers so they don't forget their why.
Yeah.
So, what role to you do coaching and mentorship play in special ed?
Well, one of the biggest thing is it provides instructional improvement, and it gives them feedback on what's happening in the classroom.
Mhm.
Because special educators, they have a variety of students that they have to work with. And I know all teachers work with different students, but the special educators, that's who they're working with, special, exceptional children. And so they have a variety of disabilities, different levels of needs. And so providing a coach that can come in, somebody that they can sound off on, and just that teachers can talk to and get some good feedback that's not judgmental, and also like I said, get feedback on observations. The other piece is they help them with professional growth because especially new teachers, having someone seasoned to come in and provide you with that extra support, telling you that you're doing a good job, or just making suggestions and say, you can do better if you get this type of deal. That's helping them professionally and it's building up their confidence. And that's really important for a coach, mentor to do. Coaches coach you through, mentors are the ones that, show you how best ways or best practices. So I think a combination of a coach slash mentor is great. Some people say, no, you should have two different ones. Well, having two different individuals to provide you with support with your growth, sometimes that's not a good idea. It's best to have one solid person as long as you have a good relationship. And then tie into that, having that relationship and having that partnership with that mentor coach is
Mhm.
important because you building trust with that person and they feel comfortable sharing certain things with you because you all have built that rapport on how to proceed with communicating with you on how you can improve or making suggestions on areas that need to be improved.
Mhm. And if you find a really good coach or mentor, they're able to play that dual role because they're able to coach you and also mentor you. So I think, just having that one reliable person is very important. When it comes to shared ownership of inclusion, how can general education teachers be better equipped to support inclusive practices?
Well, biggest thing is being open to being provided professional learning on what does inclusive education looks like.
Uh-huh.
Some teachers are good. I mean, some teachers are, they're proactive and they look at best practices. Some have to be actually taught and coached. And then you have, I be honest with you, transparent. You have some that, I ain't been doing it all these years. Why should I do that now? I mean, I just do it the way I do. And, if I get a kid on IEP, I just take a look at the IEP and work with it. No, collaborate,
Mhm.
find best practices, work with have the special education teachers to be part of your professional learning community so you know how to do the best practices, not just for students on IEPs, but that information is great for all students. And sometimes
Mhm.
I think gen ed teachers sometimes get this mindset, well, those are special ed kids. That means a special ed teacher needs to be working with them. No, you
Yeah.
work with all students. And any training you receive can work best for all your students, not just a student
Mhm.
on an IEP. And so if they have an open mind, not a fixed mindset, but a growth mindset to be open to learning how to work with all students and have an inclusive mindset, I think their classroom success would go a long way.
Absolutely. And just being able to work with different students, you're learning about how neurologically they operate and how you're able to better support them educationally, not just with your gen ed students, but with all of them. And I think that's very important. So, for our big picture question, if you had a magic wand and could change one issue in special education, what would that be?
One, I can't have two.
You have to pick one big one, the main one.
Yeah, I'm gonna be transparent with you. The staffing crisis, because if you don't have properly trained staff and staff available to provide services, you defeat it right there. So people can say,
Mhm.
well, you have mental health support. Well, if you don't have the personnel, you can't provide any supports. So
Mhm.
the staffing crisis today, especially for students that have special needs is really getting out of hand because no one wants to go into special ed. No one,
Yeah.
even if a person has dual license. Well, I know I got a license to teach special ed, but I know I also have a license to be elementary or a license to be a science teacher. I'd rather do that. So even I remember back when I first started, teachers used to have dual licenses just because special ed was huge and everybody wanted to be part of it because that was the area that was safe to be in it because if other areas were losing teachers, special ed, you can just go in there. But now it's the reverse. Nobody wants to go into special ed because other
Yeah.
areas are short too. So I want to say staffing crisis, finding the right qualified, certified individuals that are dedicated to work with students with disabilities. Um,
Mhm.
that's the biggest crisis I see right now.
Mhm. And, a big part of it is just special education being unsupported in general. I think when you think about schools or when you think about education, you're automatically just thinking about gen ed or academics. And I think there's just a lot of little things that go in special education that just stays in their bubble and they're not talking about it. But there's a lot of challenges that a lot of people, unless they have kids that are in special education, they don't see it.
Appreciate it because but you're right. It's nice to know that there are some individuals out there that understand the student with exceptional learning needs need good qualified people and people that are dedicated and being provided with supports. And I'm just going to have to toss this in it and being compensated for what they do because, and I'm not just talking teachers, and I know the emphasis is always teachers, but if you don't have paraprofessionals, especially for those areas that you need paraprofessional support, especially early childhood and kindergarten, like classrooms. Well, you need the extra support. If you don't have properly trained, compensated individuals to support those classrooms, one teacher can't even manage that by him or herself. I'm just going to be
Mhm,
transparent. So when people say, well, teachers, well, yes, but you also need to look at paraprofessionals. And because we
mhm.
have related services, speech pathologists, OTPT, you got those areas. You got to have qualified, available people for those areas too. And everybody needs to be qualified, have the credentials. And I'm not trying to make them any richer than any other educator, but they just need to be compensated a little more for the work that they do with that special population. I'm just being honest.
What is the most important thing district leaders need to understand about supporting special education staff?
Well, the biggest thing is, of course, our federal guidelines on the IDEA is compliance, compliance, compliance. And then there's a instructional part for all students that says students making good progress instructionally. So our leaders, okay, they try to balance that. They have to do the compliance because otherwise you're in violation of state statute. And if you don't do the instruction for all students, and I'm just going to be transparent, students on IEPs tend to pull down your district data because they're not being successful. And so you're
Mhm.
trying to find ways to juggle that. It's not so much focusing on compliance; it's having that balance, and it's not easy. And as a current district leader, even though I'm over special ed, I'm also responsible for instruction for these students and ensure that they are being instructed, that they're breaking progress to be successful after they leave school. And so it's a combination of both. Compliance just can't be the drill. Yes, you have to do compliance, but you got to have a balance of compliance and ensuring that your staff are also instructional as well, providing that instructional leadership support that can provide not just for academics or not just for compliance, but a balance for both. And that's really the key there.
Mhm.
Building trust. I guess I said earlier, going into the classrooms as a district leader, I try my best to make sure I go into the classrooms from the district level. Well, as a building, you should definitely be in there classrooms into those special ed classrooms. Now, should you go in there daily? If you got that kind of time, great. I don't know how kind of school you have, but if you can at least get in there once a week, once every 2 weeks or something, at least get into the classroom and make some meaningful visits and then talk to the students as well, not just the teachers, but talk to the students. I'll let the students know that you're there as their school administrator to support them so they can be successful. So that's one of the most important things I say with district leadership, ensuring that they provide the building leaders with the opportunities to do a balance in their school. Not, and yeah, compliance is important. Not producing a quality IEP, not providing students with faith. Yes, you're going to get yourself in trouble. You don't do those things, but also making sure that those administrators in the schools are also having all their staff, not just special ed, readily available to make sure that these kids are making progress academically so they can be successful. But at the end of the day, we say school. Well, we all know what school is. School is not just a place, even though it has transformed over the years. But the biggest thing is to provide an individual with an educational component so they can be successful in whatever they want to do once they become an adult. So. With that being said, that's what I would say: a balance on compliance and a balance on instruction.
You mentioned taking the time to just go out into the classrooms. And I think that's so important. It makes a huge difference in district culture. Obviously, not everyone is able to do that all the time, just depending on their responsibilities. A lot of them are separated from that aspect. But if you actually try to make the time to go in there and be a part of it, it makes a huge difference. I've seen, superintendents that really take the time to go out and go into the classrooms or read to the students. It really helps build that community and build more trust between the students and the parents as well.
That's correct.
Hmm. Well, Dr. Durden, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and for the work you're doing. If this episode resonated with you, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future conversations with leaders shaping education. Thank you for listening to Empowered K-12. I'm Elena Pinkley, and this has been Voices of Impact.